This meeting is being recorded.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Today is August 29th. This is a meeting of the SIG Network Policy API subgroup to SIG Network. This is a CNCF certified meeting, so let's be nice to each other and have a good day today. So rolling off on the agenda, pretty quiet agenda per usual. Essentially, one of the main things we're still working on is the admin network policy and getting documentation and implementations on their way. So that's been at least my major effort. There is a first draft of the website up and ready to go. And there's also some accompanying issues to actually get that website deployed. But we're going to be looking for reviews. So if anyone's watching this, please go give it a review. If it merges and it is like it is and there's stuff that's missing, open a PR. We're looking for some help. In other good news, Yang is coming off of paternity leave, so he'll be back and he'll be helping us out, back to helping us out regularly. And he's also working on the implementation for Antria. So things are moving along there. For the website, it's deployed using MK Docs, and you can actually deploy that manually on your local and just run like a local host deployment of it. And Ben went through that today, so he's going to throw a comment on there just to explain like the dependencies you have to do on a normal Linux box. Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's all I had today. I know Rahul wanted to talk, and Pierre. Good to see you, Pierre. It's been a while. They wanted to talk a little bit about FQDN. For those who don't know, we've had some chats about adding fully qualified domain name policy in the past. I think we left off quite a while ago with Rahul going to look for some more data on, what customers need, what customers are using in practice today. And our continued goal is just to look at how we can bring that into an upstream API to make it easier for everyone. So yeah, take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the recap. That's pretty much where we left it off. So in the interim, Pierre and I have put together a survey that we gave out to a few of our customers who are using FQDN related behavior, and just to try to get a pull of what they're up to. We don't have a massive sample size as of yet. We're hoping more results will trickle in, but probably what we can do is I think we'll present some of our findings, and then I'll probably clone our survey and make it like publicly available, and I'll link it in the meeting notes, and we can maybe brainstorm on if we want to send this to the broader SIG network mailing list.
Yeah, I think having like real customer data is huge. I don't think we have enough of that upstream. And I know if you shared the survey with us, it might be something that, or Ben and I can try to push out to OpenShift customers as well, like kind of following the same sort of data points. So that could be really helpful.
Yeah, that would be pretty good. I think as a recap for like the goals of this survey, this is something that we synced with Tim about more recently. Basically, the idea is we're reasonably sure that FQDN as a thing makes sense, given that so many CNI providers have independently created their own CRDs for this. The question really boils down to, can we come up with a reasonable spec for what FQDN support looks like? Because it's a complicated feature with a lot of edge cases. And the goal is to say, can we come up with a consistent spec that every CNI is more or less happy with, that we can then say, yeah, this is something that Kubernetes is declaring as the standard minimum set. Obviously much easier said than done, but that's the goal at any rate. That's the North Star. Pierre, would you like to show off some of the data that we have so far, just so we can, I guess, start talking about it?
Yep, give me a minute to pull this up.
Yeah, I'll give you co-host so you can share. Cool, that should work now.
Just 30 seconds.
worries.
Okay. Is there anything showing up on your end or?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So very quickly, I mean, the goal of this survey was to really get some more data from customers. And obviously our customers were the first target for that survey. Survey was way more than just FQDN policies, but we did include a lot of questions related to FQDN policies. So we had various, kind of people responding to it. More importantly, we also wanted to understand the scale of what customers are actually deploying, at least the people who responded to the survey. And mostly what we're seeing is that most of the people are deploying like from small to large clusters, which obviously has an impact on the way network policy is going to behave overall. And the number of workloads that are actually deployed is also like in a reasonable amount. Like it's for most of our users, it's like more than 50 workloads. Some of them are going on the high end for like 1,000 of workloads are deployed into clusters. So just compiling the different things that we've noticed from the survey, and more importantly, what we're observing, and that was actually a surprise to us, is first of all, network policy is not necessarily given to application developers, and that's something that we sort of do think that like application owners, service owners are actually using or the one defining, authoring network policy, but it turns out that it's not exactly the case. It may not be the case for every single customer, and I'm pretty sure that with a bigger sample, we would have like slightly different answers. But that's a good data point to see that there's still like platform admins and security engineers defining the network policies for the different applications, and especially the namespace bound network policies. I think another important result is that we were also trying to understand how people would use CRDs or custom definitions of network policies, and why would they need to use that. So in Kubernetes, you have obviously the network policy that is L3, L4 by default, but then if you're using a CRD from whatever CNI, that also means that you're doing it for some reason. It might be for a cluster-wide policy, or it could be for other aspect, and one of them being the FQDN resources that they want to use. And 100% of them are actually saying, I'm using a CRD or an extension of the Kubernetes network policy to have the ability to define an FQDN endpoint in my network policy. And besides that, what they're saying is that when they use an FQDN object in the network policy, it's mainly to define two things. First being an API endpoint that is outside of the cluster, something that is hosted by a cloud provider, some resource that are available that you don't control, you only have an FQDN. The second use case that they're seeing is they want to define something that belongs to a different cluster. And so they have a second cluster or many other clusters, and they need to define an endpoint that belongs to a different cluster with a different fully qualifying domain name. And that's the reason why they're using an FQDN object in the policy. Other results that we're also observing And that was actually an interesting question. One of the questions that we're asking them is, do you prefer or do you want us to filter the DNS request instead of filtering the traffic that is actually going to the data path? And the answer is actually that they would like to see something that is blocking the data path more than something that is blocking the DNS process. They don't necessarily want to have like a DNS filtering mechanism, but they want to have an IP traffic filtering mechanism based on DNS names. Okay. Also, one important thing for most of the respondents, if not all, is that they do also want to filter the communication on the IP. And they do accept the fact that, for example, if from an implementation perspective, you are actually filtering based on you send a DNS request, you get a DNS response so that there is an IP associated to your DNS request, then we're going to allow the traffic for that specific IP that is returned by the name server. If there is no DNS request, that IP shouldn't be allowed in the data path. That was actually an interesting question. Like, are you allowing traffic to an IP, even if the workload or the application is actually not sending the DNS request? So based on, I have a static IP, I should be able to send traffic to that IP. Most of the respondents said, if you want to send traffic to that destination IP, you should issue a DNS request prior to send traffic to that specific IP.
Meaning that you basically should be sending traffic via a URL or a real name, not an IP, right? Like how would you force a DNS lookup for an IP URL? I mean, you wouldn't, right?
You wouldn't, and at the same time, that shouldn't match your FQDN network policy in this case.
Okay.
So if you really want to use like static IPs in your network policy definition, then you should just use Kubernetes network policy and not the FQDN policy.
Right.
So we're just like, I mean, customers and especially respondents for that are trying to be consistent, right? Like if I'm using FQDN network policy, there's a reason for it. And this is because I need to resolve the name before being allowed to send traffic to that IP.
But the general gist of what I'm hearing y'all say is they still want to allow or deny that traffic based on the IP that's returned from DNS, not based on the host name lookup in DNS, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Sorry if I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Totally fine. And also because we wanted to make sure that at least customers were not trying to mess up with their DNS, we also asked them, like, are you tuning the DNS configuration or the DNS client in the pods or the workloads that you're running? And some of them are having like a very slight configuration that they do like to put, but most of them, the default bulk of customers do not touch anything in the DNS client in the pods. So they basically rely on whatever the cloud provider give them. In our case in GKE, but the point being is that most of the customers don't tweak the configuration just to, mess up with the DNS part. Interestingly, we're asking also those customers, are they using a service mesh? Because that could be a valid showstopper for us, saying like, if all of the customers are actually using a service mesh, why don't they just do it in Istio, for example, or some other service mesh implementations?
Right.
But not all of them implement that. So that means that there is a real need from customers saying like, we do understand the value of a service mesh. We may go there at some point, but we're not ready yet. But still, we have some API endpoints that we need to address or filter. And we don't want to set up a service mesh just for having that capability, that L7 capability. So we want to have this straight into Kubernetes. And yeah, so some of them were using a service mesh, but most of them were like vanilla Kubernetes, vanilla GKE, and still want to have FQDN filtering capabilities in the cluster.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million reasons not to want to have to deploy and manage a service mesh, right?
That's
Interesting.
correct.
Cool.
Okay,
That's actually really good data.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously more customers and more data points will definitely help to refine the numbers. But this is the trend that we're seeing, at least from among our customers right now.
Cool. So then the answer or the question becomes, how can we take this data to spur, aligning on some sort of API to represent what we're seeing here, right?
Yeah.
That's the question I think, Raul, you probably are most well positioned to try to answer, since we've already gotten a good start on it. And just for those listening, I posted the existing, whoa, is my camera zoomed in for y'all? Sorry. I posted the existing doc on FQDN in our agenda. So it's a little old now, I would assume, right? But yeah, that was really good. I was hoping you might have a data point on how many folks are using wildcard host names, like host name or like explicit host names versus ones using wildcards.
Wait. I believe we have some data points on this.
I think we did ask.
Yeah, let me just go back to the survey results and give you an update on this.
Cool. Yeah, because I think that like when Rahul first brought this proposal to Signet, the wildcard argument like descended into chaos, right? Due to, is it possible? What does the implementation look like? Like we're calling this a layer 7 policy, but if we're just mapping to IPs, it's really a layer 3. I mean, there's so many questions to come up with that. But at the same token, like y'all know, every CNI, a lot of CNIs have their own implementation already for this. I know OpenShift does, Cilium does, Calico does. So it makes sense to bring upstream for sure. And this data would definitely help. I think the argument against service mesh or wanting, having customers who don't have service mesh but still want this policy is key as well. So I don't know. What do y'all think for next steps, or like what do you envision doing next to push this forward and actually try to make progress?
I think what I'm gonna do is take this data to SIG Network just as it is. Like, don't let don't let perfect be the enemy of good or whatever. But just take what we have to SIG Network and say, here's where we're at. I think a reasonable interpretation of this data is there's a set of customers who don't want a full service mesh capability. They do want a L3, L4 filtering just using the DNS data. So I just want to, at this point, I think the name of the game is just to prime SIG Network that this is something that we're exploring. I don't think I'll go with a full-fledged proposal yet. I'll probably go back to that doc that you just linked, and I think I need to just polish it and reread it because it's been a couple months for me as well.
A good place, I think, I definitely agree. Like, let's bring this before Signet because it's actual real data and they don't get to see a lot of that. And I think it was well done. So good job to y'all. I know it's a small data set for now, but it's something, and it's something to go off of. And a good landing place, like if we can get them to agree on the use case, might be admin network policy. I mean, it's built in such a way that it's pretty easily extensible, right? We're not going to face all these problems we're facing, and it's still really young. So although like folks want this for network policy, like maybe the fastest way to get it functionally in an API we own is to put it in admin network policy, see how it goes with implementers, and then down the road, put it into network policy v2, right?
Right.
Just a thought.
Did we ever come up with a strategy for like how CNIs would reject admin network policies that they don't understand. Did we close that discussion? Like we did a lot of talking about it, but
We have some notes on it, and I'm gonna have to go back and look because it's super hazy. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure at the end of the day, it was kind of two-pronged. Like now the API is designed such that the implementer isn't going to do something stupid if they don't understand the API. And
right.
our assumption is, I think what we've agreed on is that if they don't understand the API, they need to do something about it. Like, they shouldn't fail and, fail open and allow traffic. They should update. At the end of the day, we can't ensure that every CNI is up to date, but we can help through API design ensure that they aren't going to do something totally stupid. And that was done via taking like implicit behavior away. No longer does nothing there mean select all, right?
Right.
It's core. Let me go back and look at the notes. I think there was a lot of discussion on it, maybe possibly providing like an upstream admission webhook or something of the sort. There was also talk on serializing unstructured data from Cube into what the CNI knows is to be structured, and if that fails, the CNI should fail, right? Those were the two things I think we were talking about.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think the admin network policy suggestion is a good one, because definitely no one's gonna spring for extending regular network policy.
Even though we did it, I mean, we threw status,
Yeah.
network policy status got thrown in there, but there's so much tech debt in that API. I just don't think it's worth it.
I agree.
We've been talking in circles about it for 2 years. Right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so I think the admin network policy angle is a good one. That might be a good proving ground. And then, yeah.
I mean, that data point was pretty wild. One of the first ones y'all threw out about really there aren't many application developers writing network policy. And I'm not surprised at all. I've seen customers network policy setups, and it's always a cluster admin who's asking me questions. And guess what? They have like hundreds of policies. Like, it's disgusting on a large cluster, right? So pretty funny. And I would think like for FQDN, if we're talking about external services or even cluster services, like it would hopefully be the admin doing such a configuration, right? So something to think about.
I was actually checking in the back end, and there half of the respondents that are actually using patterns, so like regular expression to express like a piece of a domain.
Yep.
Most of them are actually using more than 10 entries per rule.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. It's a little bit more for match names, so fully qualified domain names. But interestingly, half of them are using more than 10 entries in their rules.
Okay.
As a start, that's something.
Yeah, that's definitely a piece of data. Like, the key is just try as hard as you can not to get bogged down in the implementation side of things with Signet. It's like, I don't think it's relevant for the API design. Like, obviously, is it possible or not? But even with this API we just merged, like, we aren't exactly 100% sure how easy it's going to be to implement for some folks. And the whole goal is saying, like, let's figure it out. Let's see what happens, right? So, cool. That was really great. Thanks, y'all, for bringing that to here. Something to go in line with the idea about possibly putting it one day in admin network policy is the issue about north-south traffic. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to post it here.
Oh, that's right.
I've already had stakeholders within Red Hat talking about wanting this. We knew it was going to come up. We dished it to V1 Alpha 2 or a V1 beta discussion, but it's something we need to talk about. And we could add in one of, if we added north-south traffic, we're going to have to be able to select that traffic, and we're probably not going to use IP blocks. So this could be a selector, right? Cool. Anything else y'all want to bring up today, or? Awesome. So you kind of have the action item of just updating that FQDN doc. And then I think you can just give like a really short presentation, maybe not even talking about how you want to get this implemented yet, but just presenting the data and see how folks respond to that, right? Could be interesting. Yeah. I think it's like if you can win over a couple of people and just have them say like, we need this, we want to solve this use case, then
that would be a huge win.
Right. Like if you can win over some of the core folks and not even talk about implementation at all or where we're going to put it, just say like, do we need these use cases or not? So maybe in line with that data put together, like you already had some use cases, but maybe revamp them to what you've heard and just present like a couple super simple key user stories you want to try to get together.
Yeah.
Simplification. That's what I've learned after a year and a half of trying to get people to align. Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, y'all. That was really great. Okay. Anything else folks want to talk about today, or should we get some time back? Hopefully folks come and watch this presentation. I'm giving a shout out because this was a good one. But yeah, if there's nothing else, we will get about 30 minutes back and keep chugging on what we're doing. Thanks so much for coming today. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Talk to y'all soon.
Bye.
Bye.